more about him as a person. In fact, it's more about him being a dad first and foremost, and of course, we're going into more of his love life.
Right. So, just judging from the whole week, it sounds like you're a really busy guy, always on the go. So, do you actually have time for a love life?
Well, I still remember when I started this career 20 years ago, when I was with some of the more grizzled cameramen and journalists out there, and they would tell me, hey, you know what? You know the stats of, how successful journalists are in their love life? And they would tell me that 90% of journalists get divorced eventually. And that's sort of a number that I'm not sure how true it is, but it's a number that sort of rang through my head through the years. And I've seen, it being pretty tough, especially if you're on the road. You can imagine you're in Mumbai one day, you're in London the next day, you're covering stories. It's hard to give a woman the time she deserves. Women love gifts, I'm sure, but at the same time they want quality time as number one, and it's a bit of a challenge. But I can say that I'm very fortunate to have a loving wife and partner, and she's here in the studio today, and she supports me without a question, which is a huge gift.
You have an 18-year-old daughter.
Correct.
That's so cool. What's the toughest part about being a dad to a teenager?
Well, I'm going to change the question around a bit. The greatest part is the fact that she's a beautiful, smart, bright 18-year-old who's studying film, of all things, in Toronto. And she's the joy of my life. She's just fantastic. Now, what's the toughest part? The toughest part being a journalist dad is the fact that throughout her life, she's had to be very patient with me because at times I couldn't be there for her. You can imagine that I spend probably 3 weeks on the road in a month, and then I'm back for a little bit. But, she also is very proud of what I do, and so, and I'm very proud of where she is. So it's very interesting now in terms of seeing where she heads. I tell her to avoid journalism because, you know what, it's rated as perhaps the top 5 worst jobs in the world.
Yourself 10 years from now.
Ooh, 10 years from now. Much older, perhaps? I'm not sure, actually. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing with 101 East right now. We do half-hour documentary shows around Asia, sometimes around the world, and I think that it's such a great venue to sort of bring people's stories to a greater audience that it's really hard to think beyond that. I'm enjoying it. Perhaps in 10 years' time I'll still be doing it. Maybe I'll be somewhere else doing documentaries, or I'll be back in news covering breaking events around the world. I'm not sure, but I can't really see myself leaving journalism. Having done it for 20 years now, I've really fallen in love with this craft because I really do believe it is the front seat of the world. You actually see breaking news happening. You actually see world events evolving right in front of us. There's so many things going on in Asia right now. For example, we have the Thai coup crisis right now. We've got issues of disputed islands between a lot of nations, questions as to whether these flashpoints in Asia will erupt into serious conflict. We've got the UN struggling with so many issues, like even killer robots, something we're talking about in upcoming days.
Wow.
So there's always tons of issues, and I think that, my years of studying encyclopedias as a little kid sort of, is inbred in my DNA, and I don't think I can ever get rid of journalism in my blood.
All day we're with Steve Chao from Al-Jazeera's 101 East. It's a show, of course, on Al-Jazeera TV.
Tell us more about it.
Well, 101 East is a show that runs once a week, and we do hard-hitting stories, we do light stories, we do stories of heart. And coming up on June 12th, I've got a program on humanoids, which looks at an interesting debate about whether we as humans are creating machines that will ultimately destroy us. We're talking about killer robots. And, you might think that this is the stuff of Terminator and all these sort of sci-fi movies in a science fiction world. But, last month, the UN actually convened its first ever meeting debating whether countries around the world should preemptively ban the use of autonomous killer robots. And it is a big issue. We have drones flying over Afghanistan, over Pakistan these days. Some can independently attack targets without human control. We've got robot sentries along the DMZ between North and South Korea. These robot sentries can fire on movement if they will. Right now, there's a human that actually has to press a button to allow it to do so, but it doesn't need it. And the pace of development in technology these days is so quick, that humanoids, human-looking robots, are being designed by many firms around the world. We were in Japan looking at some of this. And Google's involved as well, heavily into robots. It's counting on the big next wave of robots. So the debate is on. What do we as humans do? Will we create machines that will ultimately threaten our own existence.
This sounds like a movie. I, Robot. Remember the
Yes.
You're part man, part machine, and there seems to be two streams of development that's happening right now, according to some of the leading minds in Japan. One is working towards machines with military purposes. Another is looking at all the social benefits, like robotic butlers.
Wonderful.
Wow.
I'm all for the robotic butlers.
That's crazy, but that's definitely a show that we got to watch out for. When's that coming out again?
That's coming out June 12th. In the meantime, we've got lots of other shows. We're looking at Bhutan's Forgotten People this week, and so please tune in to 101 East.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Steve Chao, of course, is an investigative journalist with Al-Jazeera's 101 East.
It was great having you
what
all
an
week.
experience.
Thank you very
Thank you
much
for
for
your
having
time.
me. It was very fun with you guys.